When everything falls apart, what remains? Not answers, not logic, not even strength. Sometimes, what remains is silence. A silence that doesn't shout, but contains everything. The young monk couldn't understand. His master, the Buddha himself, remained still. Day after day, while the world outside was falling apart, war, disease, loss, the Buddha sat in silence. No guidance, no sermon, no words. Frustrated, the disciple finally asked, "Master, why do you remain silent? Can't you see what's happening to the world? Don't you care?" But the Buddha remained still. He opened his eyes slowly, looked into the young man's soul, and returned to his silence. That silence hurt more than any rebuke. The disciple left. He walked out of the temple carrying questions that burned like fire. He wanted certainty, direction, relief, but received none of it. All he had was silence. He wandered through cities in ruins, villages full of fear, families mourning their losses. He asked sages, scholars, priests. Everyone had something to say. Everyone had a name for the pain, but none of it helped. Because the real question wasn't what caused the pain. The question was, what do I become inside the pain? The disciple began to hate silence. It became unbearable, because in silence the mind screams louder. And what he heard was terrifying. You're not enough. You're lost. You'll never be wise like him. You'll never understand. He cried at night, in caves, on mountaintops, by rivers. He begged the stars for a sign. But stars do not speak. They simply exist. And that too began to feel cruel. One day, he encountered a dying man on the road. No one stopped. No one helped. The disciple knelt, held the man's hand, and asked, "Do you want water? Food? A word of comfort?" The man shook his head. He whispered, "Just stay. You don't need to speak. Just stay." So the disciple stayed, no teaching, no prayer, just silence. The man closed his eyes and smiled, then he died. And in that moment something cracked inside the disciple. Not pain, not relief. A space, a strange stillness. He returned to the temple after 7 years, older, tired. He approached his master. "I still don't understand your silence," he said, "but I no longer fear it." Buddha smiled, and for the first time he spoke. Buddha said, "You thought my silence was emptiness, but silence is where truth rests." The disciple's eyes filled with tears, not from understanding, but from feeling. For 7 years he had fought the silence, tried to decode it, escape it, resist it. Now he realized he had never sat with it. He had never let silence be a teacher. The Buddha continued, "Words can guide you to the door, but silence is what opens it." The disciple looked down. He remembered the man dying in his arms, how peace had entered not through explanation but presence. In that stillness, the noise of his doubts had faded, and something deeper had emerged, not clarity, but surrender. And Buddha whispered, "Life breaks those who try to control it, but life protects those who trust what cannot be seen." Suddenly, the disciple realized something. All his suffering wasn't punishment, it was pruning. All the silence wasn't absence, it was guidance. And all the unanswered prayers were answers in disguise. The disciple returned to the village. This time, he didn't go to preach, he went to listen. He sat beside the widow who had lost everything, not to offer advice, but to hold space for her grief. He walked with the young man who blamed himself for his father's death, not to remove his guilt, but to witness it without judgment. He didn't speak of karma or destiny or enlightenment. He simply sat in silence, and the silence did the healing. Over time, the villagers began to change, not because they were told what to believe, but because someone finally saw them. The disciple stopped trying to be a Buddha and started becoming a human again. One night, sitting alone beneath a fig tree, he whispered into the darkness, "I no longer know the answers, and maybe I never will, but I no longer need them to feel peace. A soft breeze passed, as if the universe had heard. And for the first time, the silence didn't scare him. It held him. Weeks passed. The disciple didn't return to the monastery. He had no plans, no mission, no destination, only presence. And in that presence, something strange began to happen. People from distant villages started seeking him, not because he was wise, but because he was quiet. His presence was like a mirror. It didn't reflect perfection. It reflected truth. And people, so used to noise, found peace in the reflection of their own unspoken pain. He became the one others came to cry beside, the one who didn't fix or teach or save. He simply stayed. A merchant knelt beside him once and asked, "What did you learn in your silence?" The disciple looked up. He could have spoken of emptiness, of detachment, of impermanence, but instead he whispered, "I learned that silence doesn't mean absence, it means presence, without control." And the merchant wept. The disciple hadn't become who he dreamed of being. He had become who life needed him to be, and that was enough. Years later, a young boy approached the disciple, now gray-haired, still barefoot, still silent. "Why don't you talk like other monks?" the boy asked, holding a broken toy in his hands. The old disciple looked at him and smiled, then gently placed the broken toy in the boy's palm without trying to fix it, and whispered only one thing: "Not everything broken needs to be repaired. Some things need to be held." That was the final lesson. The silence of Buddha wasn't a void. It was a sanctuary, a place where grief could breathe, where the ego could dissolve, where the noise of fixing gave way to the art of simply being. So if your life feels like it's falling apart, if the noise becomes unbearable, don't rush to solve or run or explain. Let it fall, let it burn, and then sit, in silence, in surrender, in the sacred space between collapse and clarity. That's where the real answers live, not in shouting, but in stillness. If this story found you at the right time, share it with someone who needs to breathe again. Leave a comment with one word: peace. And remember, the silence you fear may be the beginning of your freedom.